Hello everyone, so today we've got some new reveals for Liael, 4 new cards, 3 grade 1s, 1 new boss card, so quite a bit to get into as well. There's quite a lot of things to kind of think about with the Liael deck, although I've already kind of speculated some skills and did a bit of my own testing, so it doesn't really change too much with the deck list I was thinking about doing, but I still got to go through a few ideas. So firstly, Descending Eagle is a common card. When this card is bound during your turn, so it doesn't matter if it's from the rearguard circle or from your drop zone. If you have a grade 3 or greater Liael Vanguard, choose a grade 1 or greater normal unit without Sentinel from your drop, and you may put it on the bottom of your deck. So it's a recurrer, you can just put cards back in. It's just like Euphoria basically, but without the power buffs. And it's actually not quite as bad now, because now that we've got the new Liael, you've got the new main phase skill, so you don't actually have to rely on the attack combo binding skill, because that's always been a problem with grade 1s, like for example the Divine Sister. The Divine Sister was awkward because you don't really want to be like, oh, I'll attack with this grade 1, or I'll just boost this grade 1 and then bind it to call another booster or something. You just get less pressure basically. So it's kind of good because, and not just the pressure, sorry, it's also good. It's also kind of the problem you have as well as the on-play skills. You miss out on those, well, all the on-bind skills that give you +1s. So obviously you prefer cards like Idoras or Religiel or Gabelius as well. So that's always been a kind of a downside, but now that you've got the main phase skill, you can actually use this as a potential target. And because ride line cyclers are not good anymore, apparently, so this could actually be discarded for your ride line instead, if you wanted to set up maybe for recurring, and also you can discard with it anyway when you're guarding or PGing or whatever. So it's actually not too bad. It's not as bad as it seems, and I think they kind of subtly made this card a little bit better as well. So if you want to put some sort of budget common card, this actually could be a decent pick to run as well. Then Knight of Magnificent Beauty Amite. So when your unit is placed on another rearguard circle in the same column as this unit by the ability to agree through a greater Liael Vanguard, put this card into your soul, and that place unit gets 5k into an turn. So it's very similar to Istia. It's like a symmetrical attacker, except that it's only 5k on the second battle rather than an 8k. And it's not a boost anymore, so you're negging 1 and just, but you're soul charging, so that's kind of decent. But the 5k is only good with something like Gabelius, so the 8k is still more valued if you're boosting a grade 2 with 10k base written on it. So it's kind of an interesting card. You could use it for soul charging, but the 5k placement is pretty restrictive as well. And it's just okay, but I think there's a lot of options as well. But soul charging is something that is kind of good, but it's just the problem is that if you're negging, you kind of start to wonder like just how worth is it really to keep on doing these neg 1 soul charge, because we've got another card here, Knight of the Distant Bow Almov. When this unit is placed on rearguard circle, choose a grade 3 card with Liael in its card name from your ride deck. You may reveal it. If you reveal the card or you have grade 3 or greater Liael as your Vanguard, you can energy charge 1. So this just gives you an extra energy. If you bind and call again, you could get another energy if you wanted to play like that. But the other skill, well, we kind of thought this was actually meant to be like another skill just to make it even better, the first one that I just read to you. But this is actually just there to maintain Liael, because it turns out Liael is actually worse than we thought it was, because it's an Energy Blast 4. So they didn't mention Energy Blast in the anime. I think there's a reason why Hikari has been playing Heavenly Bright, which I'll get to a bit later, but they're really trying to push that card. The other skill, the one we saw in the anime, but we just weren't really sure on the wording. At the end of the battle that this unit boosted, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Liael in its card name, any opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, put this unit into your soul, and you as the player, you get 5k to your front row until end of turn. So this is really good, because what you end up with is obviously multiple battles. Like on Divine Turn you have 3 units, but then it's also bad because your Vanguard is not getting the 5k power. Only you are getting only your rearguards are getting the 5k, and your first battle, which is going to be a rearguard because you do the binding spirit call on the Vanguard swing, is also going to miss out on the 5k. So really most of the time it's just going to be 2 battles they're using it for, but it's a bit stronger than the other one we just mentioned, but not as restrictive because well, this one's more restrictive because your opponent has to be on grade 3. So a lot of things you have to kind of think about there as well. So that's kind of that with this card. Then going on to Liael. So Energy Blasting 4 and binding a normal unit from your rearguard circle or drop. Choose a card from your hand and discard it, and it gets an extra drive +1. So it's actually a net 0 because you have to discard 1 and to get the drive check. So it's a bit of a downer, even if you bind the card on your field rather than taking it from your drop zone. So really, when we saw Idoras in the anime, this was not like some sort of cool, oh wow, +1 combo, just like with the times when you bind it, right? During battle phase. It's kind of different, so this is just there to kind of it's kind of just there as kind of a gimmick you can potentially do, but otherwise you can just maybe guard with it or drop it in the drop zone or something, and then just go bind. Okay, don't have to like go through the whole hoops of calling card, because you are losing 1 soul if you're using this to draw. So it depends if you want to dig through a deck because you really hate your hand, or if you just want to maintain hand advantage, but you're fine with what you've got in your hand anyway. You just want a bit more quantity and maintain your soul level as well. So really, the main downside is that you're losing soul essentially. But other than that, kind of interesting how they did it. But they added the energy blast 4 on top of all that negging, so it's really weird. But if you're buying from drop, normally you'd want to just bind this as well. Too, but you can't bind triggers. But the battle phase, you can still do it for the battle skill. In fact, it's even better now to do it, because when it attacks, can +1, choose one of your rear guards, bind it, search your deck for up to one card with the same card name as any card in your bind zone, call it to range off your deck. So you can just, it doesn't matter what you bind anymore. Before, you had to actually get a card that usually, ideally, you had some sort of combo with another copy of itself. So Idras, you want to call more Idrases, you want to call more Religiels, or you want to call another Gabrielius, but you had to actually get the previous copy beforehand. But now it's just changing into another unit is now an option you can do. So if you're against field control decks like Sagra, they just nuke everything, but you don't actually have to desperately find the same cards again and keep drawing into them. Or using Sequence Wizard, because you do rely quite a bit on this, which is CB heavy as well, which is a bit of a problem with itself, to kind of keep on finding stuff. And even if you played stuff like Sergoan, if you aren't playing the older engine and stuff, which by the way, the best one's probably the Wisdom card, or the new Nebula Knights, which is unconfirmed if we even get that in English, but if you're playing stuff like that, then sure, Sergon becomes a lot better, because unfortunately, if you're not using orders, then the issue is that then if you're against a deck like Saga, which has all these Varlords, especially in English format, then suddenly your opponent is going to always have more units than you to stop you from checking top 2 and scrying for all your replacement pieces. So this really helps a lot, actually. And you can even call an over trigger if you really want to put an OT back in deck, and then just bind it and then just go Liael PG, return back to deck the over trigger and some other card, and then just keep them going, and then just hit OT eventually at some point. You could play a deck that way if you wanted to, just for some sort of like, you know, niche kind of play, just like with Reziel. But Reziel's a bit easier because you've got the revive from drop and the Church intercept skill, although they can still technically retire your over trigger if you don't have Angel Bracing Ladder. So Liael's kind of better at it, but just has more of a narrow window because you can't revive from drop the over trigger, like with Reziel, which obviously assumes you're guarding with it in the first place, or you Soul Charge and Soul Blast or whatever. So then the second skill, when it attacks, cost can +1. Choose one of your rear guards, bind it. Third skill, Divine skill. At the end of battle, this unit attack. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, choose a grade 3 or greater card with Liael in its card name from assault or drop, and you may write it as stand. If you wrote that unit's drive becomes 1 until on a turn. So you may notice a whole handful of things here. If you compare it to the old Liael, there's actually like 3 things that are different. Firstly, it doesn't say to call specifically the same copy of your Vanguard, like with the old one. It says any Liael that's grade 3 or greater, grade 4. Which normally, you know, doesn't really mean much because they never make grade 4s or anything anyway. However, they also put in this other bit where it says that unit's drive becomes 1 until a turn. So maybe they're actually serious about considering it, because the other one says -1. This one says 1. And it's quite a bit of a thing where in D format, they seem to really try to avoid making cards have twin drive as a second battle. It's like they really want people to have an easier time figuring out how to guard the restand attack, I guess, because otherwise things are a bit too good. Even Minerva, which comes in the set before, they really kind of went out the way to make her word to become 1 drive in the end. But then again, the original Minerva Stride also did the same thing anyway, if you're not, you know, using Norn and all that stuff. But the traditional way of playing it is that way as well. So there's also that. But a thing that they've also changed here is that the whole where you call Liael from, it doesn't have to be from the drop, you can call from Soul as well. So now, back in the past, we had to rely so heavily on this card, right, Idaras. This is when the deck first came out. Euphoria, Painkiller Angel, or even Teetholt, but that's provided you actually see an order to play. And then you have to try and force out Liael from your drop zone during your Persona turns. That obviously was a bit awkward, because sometimes it just doesn't work. And things became a bit easier because they've also added these cards into the mix now. And these are quite reliable, actually. Quite neat to play into. But still, you do have bad days, regardless of all that. And even though I just mentioned Painkiller Angel, I didn't really play Painkiller Angel in the first place, so I don't think many people did. But in the anime, Hikari was using it as well during, I think, Season 2. So there's kind of all these Soul Blast neighbors, but if things go really bad, the deck just sucks altogether. So now you've got this whole combo with the new with the new grade 3, or even with the this new grade 3 over this one, where if things go really south and your deck just breaks completely, you can just go, okay, I'll just ride the one from Soul, I guess. Kind of wasteful, but you know what? just go for it anyway. So it just means that when you're losing, you're not losing super badly. It just means you're actually still playing the game somewhat. Because when you're losing with Liael before, the deck really kind of sunk into the abyss because it relied too much on what it had in the field. Not anymore, thanks to both the second skill revision and the third skill revision as well. And going back to energy, it's a bit like Savastio. If you remember back then, energy blast 4 every time just so you can call a card. But there was quite a bit of energy charging going on as well because of the grade 1s that they had as well, just like we've got one here. So this was kind of a red flag when I first read it. But at the same time, what this also means is that Divine Sister Biscotti or Bradiarch and all these other cards, Pernacetra or however you pronounce it, these cards are not as good anymore because you don't really have the energy to spare a lot of times. So Energy Blast 4, if you were to not draw this card, you then have to, as a player going first, who only gets energy charge 3 on turn 2, you then have to dig into that energy reserve to then be able to use this skill on your turn 3 if you don't see this card. So that means you only have basically 2 energy to spare, which means you've got to avoid using energy cyclers in the first place because otherwise you won't be able to use this card. So there's an argument for not playing cyclers basically. But then you notice that little magic number 2, a safe card to play, like Hikari is in the anime, would be Heavenly Bright. So they're really trying to push that, it feels like. This Energy Blast 2 card, which is not a bad card to play, to be fair. So you could potentially use it. Then you've also got, in addition to Heavenly Bright, you've got the Dogs, the Order card that can basically give 2 cards that boost 10k power. It's not quite as broken as it is in Minerva though, but Minerva's a really good deck to play that card in if you want extra power. But that's another Energy Blast 2 is pretty decent, I guess, that you can run as well, especially if you choose to play Surgo on. But otherwise, if your opponent goes first, you'll get an extra 3 energy, so you end up with 6 spare energy, assuming you see 1 copy of this. But then if you see another copy of this, you can then get Energy Blast 7 draw, which is not too bad either. So there's quite a lot of upsides to it as well, in that sense, but you have to be very careful. I don't think it's worth really playing hard into Energy Blast 7. If you just see it, you see. If you see like too many of these, but the problem is if you do the Energy 7 Blast draw, every turn you're only going to get 3 energy, and then you're relying way too much on seeing like not just a spare one, but you're then also seeing 1 every turn. So you actually have to see 3 by turn 4 of this card, which is just such an unhealthy way to play the game. So the Energy Blast 7 is not that great. I think Heavenly Bright is a card to consider running potentially, but maybe a few copies you could run safely. But if you can't use the other copy, just discard it for PG or something. So that's kind of my thoughts on energy. It does now open up a bit more space because now that frees up up to 4 cards, so you can actually run more stuff now. Whether you weren't playing 4 copies of something before, or whether you're in the list that you're potentially going to build in the first place, or you maybe want to play some of these new cards, maybe even Groguan for countercharge as well. So there's quite a bit to think about. Even the Divine Sister, if you want to go for that kind of late game, giving more and more power to Istia, so that's also a line of play you can consider as well. This deck is not quite as keen on drawing into the deck as it used to be, because of cards like Liael as well, and because of the fact you've got more Liaels. Although, to be fair, you do really need to see the persona, right? Because this card here does not have the name of the old Liael, so that's really annoying. That's something you've got to just kind of look out for as well. So if you ride into this, it's kind of really bad. And also this card can actually ride into this as well. So if you want to switch into a different persona boss, but you just lose out on persona ride momentum as well. So there's quite a few things you kind of have to wiggle around with. But Groguan I think is quite a good option as a filler card as well, because your wizards, then you can use your wizards more recklessly as well, and then expect to countercharge in the game. Gabelis becomes easier to use multiple times as well. So well, if you're not using a card like Istia as well, then you don't really feel as bad about it either. Because Istia, I think the weird thing about Istia, this card with these two really doesn't feel that great, because when you start going like this and then this or whatever, then this kind of loses value because you have to use it on the same column. So if you're doing the Divine Skill turn, if you want that maximum power, you actually have to spam bind in the same card in the same column. So it's not very good for like multi binds. It's only good for linear binding, basically. So you're not being as efficient otherwise. So there's quite a lot of interesting stuff really that comes out of this whole deck all in all. Quite a lot to think about though. So if you've got like some thoughts about this whole how this whole deck is looking, then just let me know in the comments as well. I kind of can't wait. I mean, they did not make the deck stronger. The deck is basically the same power level that it's always been. All they really did was they just made the deck function better. So like if you go against Dragon Empire or some sort of control deck, the deck doesn't just go all the way to hell, basically. So now it's like, it doesn't really have any sort of default horrible matchups. It's got better access to the PG ability as well with Liael. That's a lot better now. And you can rely on it more to return cards. You don't actually have to rely on Euphoria anymore. This card is not as important as it used to be. You can still play it, but obviously the new Grade 1 and the new Liael, sorry, not the new Liael, the old Liael, which is being enabled by the new Liael because you can now use it as a PG more often. They kind of make it so that her job has already been covered anyway by other cards. But then again, I mean, when I say other jobs, I mean like this slot for boosting, because you may sometimes have too many copies of the booster card, and then you just go, okay, well, I'll just get to Vanguard, which then obviously clashes with Euphoria because she only really gives you that 5k and 2k and whatever if you're boosting the Vanguard. The 5k is in for the Soul Blast part of the ability, so there's quite a bit of things to think about. But that's also another thing I might even consider just keeping Euphoria as well. I'm not sure how many copies of the new Grade 1 Soul Charge I'll play. The deck does need boosters, but then at the same time, the deck also does need front row attackers, especially in the Bavsagra format, where ideally you always want to make sure you have a grade 2 in your hand so that you can just recklessly call out. And then you have another spare grade 2 also, so you can then use it on your turn 3. So that's ideally how you want to play Liael. But then traditionally if you did that, you would have then had less boosters, especially now that you're playing more grade 3s, including the Liael PG, this new Liael, and Gabelius. Although Gabelius is a rear guard, I guess, but you can't use Gabelius in the early game, and he's definitely not that good on turn 3 because you might not even go to 4 damage, unless you willfully go to 4 damage, I guess. You could always play that way. That's also an option, I guess. But then if you heal down, then that's also a bit bad as well. So there's quite a bit to think about, I think, on that one. And I think now that you've got rid of the Cycler, because you never really want to call the Cycler anyway in the first place, you could potentially just play more grade 2s as a result. Actually, you can even play Aspronia if you wanted to as well. I may consider that. Seems a bit more playable as well if you want to put more pressure in the early game. And I guess if you've got more space to pick Rogue One, it kind of becomes a bit more worth it as well. So, and you probably don't need the Wizard quite as much now because of the new Grade 1. So then, yeah, there's quite a lot you can think about. But Aspronia was not something I was actually thinking about coming to this video. I was actually thinking about a whole bunch of other stuff. But I was actually kind of like starting to fall away from Aspronia because I didn't really like, because of how tight my deck was, I didn't really like how the CB management was going. But now I think there's actually a bit more, because you're now thinking, oh, I can't play these cycles anymore. I might as well consider something else then. So I think now I'm kind of in that stage where I've got to consider those things. But yeah, that's pretty much it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.